What if I told you that one of the greatest literary geniuses was seconds away from being executed, only to be reborn as a transformed man and write the most profound novels ever about good and evil? Dostoevsky not only survived a mock execution and years in prison, but he also explored the human soul from its darkest corners to its purest light. This isn't just about literature, it's a journey into what it means to be human. Fyodor Dostoevsky is widely recognized as one of the greatest novelists ever, but his genius goes beyond literature. He's also considered a great psychologist, exploring characters in his works that reflect the full range of human experience, from deep evil to near saintly virtue. Sigmund Freud, impressed by Dostoevsky's writings, wrote in a letter that his novels contained the most valuable psychological material he knew. This explores the events that shaped Dostoevsky's life, turning him into a tormented genius with an unmatched understanding of the human psyche. In 1849, at 27, Dostoevsky was already a known writer who had lost the promise of his youth. 3 years earlier, he gained fame in Russia's literary scene with Poor Folk, but his later works were harshly criticized and largely ignored. Many thought his career was nearly over before it truly began. Decades later, he would stun the world with masterpieces like Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, The Idiot, and Demons. This extraordinary turnaround came after 5 years of extreme personal suffering. During that time, he was imprisoned, spent months in solitary confinement, faced a mock execution, and was sent to Siberia, where he lived for 4 years in brutal conditions among degraded criminals. These experiences deeply marked his life and made him intimately familiar with the darkness and greatness of the human soul, forming the foundation for the unforgettable themes and characters in his works. The turning point began with his decision to join the Petrushevsky Circle, a weekly gathering of intellectuals led by Mikhail Petrushevsky. This event would drastically change his life. The group discussed social and political ideas shaping Russia and Europe in 1848. As more people joined, the meetings became a hub for intellectual debates. Known for his near-pathological shyness and difficulty in social interactions, Dostoevsky was more a listener than an active participant. He described his role in the group: "I'm not a great orator, as anyone who knows me can tell. I don't like speaking at length or with emphasis, even with the few friends I have, much less in society, where I'm seen as reserved and uncommunicative." When Dostoevsky started attending the Petrushevsky Circle, the meetings were still allowed. But in 1848, as revolutions spread across Europe, Russia's ruling class feared progressive ideas might spark unrest. The government increased censorship and cracked down on free expression. Eventually, the Petrushevsky Circle was infiltrated by the secret police. In April 1849, all members were arrested. Dostoevsky was taken from concurrent his home in the middle of the night and brought to the Peter and Paul Fortress, where he spent 8 months in solitary confinement awaiting his sentence. In an 1873 letter, he recalled his first days in prison. "When I was taken to the fortress, I thought the end had come. I didn't imagine I'd survive the first 3 days." Despite the initial shock, Dostoevsky discovered a surprising ability to adapt to the extreme conditions of a 19th century maximum security prison. He realized humans have untapped reserves of energy and resilience that emerge in times of great adversity. In a letter from prison, he reflected, "A good disposition depends only on me. The human being has infinite reserves of strength and vitality. I never imagined there was so much in us, but now I know from experience." In September 1849, the investigation into the Petrushevsky Circle concluded. The report claimed the group's members generally opposed the government and sought changes to the existing order. As a result, Dostoevsky and 14 others were taken to Semyonov Square in St. Petersburg to hear their sentence: execution by firing squad, to be carried out immediately. Facing the verdict, Dostoevsky believed he was minutes from death. In shock, he turned to another condemned man and said, "We'll be with Christ." The man, an atheist, replied with an ironic smile, "We'll just be a handful of dust." At that moment, Dostoevsky experienced what he later called mystic terror, a feeling he immortalized in his novel, The Idiot. In the book, the character Prince Mishkin tells the story of a man who thought he had 5 minutes left before his execution. The man carefully divided his final moments. 2 minutes to say goodbye to his comrades, 2 to reflect inwardly, and the last to look at the world around him. Amid the tension, he noticed the beauty of a nearby church's golden dome shining in the sun. Those rays of light seemed like a new essence, something he'd soon become part of. Yet the uncertainty and horror of the unknown were unbearable. The 15 condemned men were lined up in groups of 3 for the execution. Dostoevsky was in the second group. As the first group stood before the firing squad, a carriage arrived with a letter from the Tsar. The death sentence was commuted to 4 years of hard labor in a Siberian prison camp. Back in his cell at the Peter and Paul fortress, Dostoevsky wrote to his brother, reflecting on how facing death had changed his perspective. When I think of the past, I see how much time I wasted on nothing, how much was lost in futile mistakes, laziness, and inability to live. I failed to appreciate life. How many times I sinned against my own heart and soul. My heart bleeds realizing this. Life is a gift. Life is happiness. Every minute has the potential to be an eternity of joy. If only the young knew this. Now I'm reborn, transformed into a new person. However, the relief of escaping execution soon gave way to despair. He was sent to Siberia, where he spent the next 4 years in inhumane conditions, living among all kinds of criminals. Life was harsh. Scarce rations, exhausting work, and constant filth defined daily life. Yet Dostoevsky noticed that many prisoners seemed less affected by the misery than he was. This led him to reflect on the true strength of humanity. Man is a creature that gets used to everything, and I think that's the best definition of him. Notes from the House of the Dead. One of the biggest challenges in prison was the constant presence of others. Dostoevsky was never alone. Guards and prisoners were always nearby, depriving him of any moment of solitude. This lack of privacy made him value something many take for granted in freedom, the ability to be alone. He observed, "I never imagined how terrible and agonizing it would be to not be completely alone for even a single minute." The 4 years in prison were marked by deep spiritual loneliness, despite being physically surrounded by others. Dostoevsky never formed strong bonds with anyone. At first, this loneliness seemed unbearable, but over time he realized it had a transformative power. He described this as an inner awakening that led to a radical shift in how he saw himself. Despite being surrounded by hundreds of other prisoners, I experienced terrible loneliness the whole time. Spiritually alone, I revisited every event of my past life, down to the smallest details. I pondered my past, judged myself rigorously and mercilessly. Sometimes I even blessed my fate for placing me in that solitude. Without it, I'd never have done such self-analysis or examined my life so deeply. This introspection led him to create a detailed plan for the future and commit to following it with determination. He reflected, "A blind faith took hold in me, the certainty that I could achieve everything I hoped for. I prayed for freedom to come soon so I could test myself again in a new time and new challenges." During his imprisonment, Dostoevsky also witnessed humanity's darker side. He lived among depraved criminals and saw how power corrupted prison guards. Many who started as ordinary, decent men were transformed by the authority they held over prisoners. Dostoevsky reflected on this in Notes from the House of the Dead. A man who experiences unlimited power over another's body, blood, and spirit inevitably loses control over his own senses. Tyranny becomes a habit and finally a disease. Even the best men can, through repetition, become coarse and insensitive to the point of brutality. Blood and power intoxicate, depravity becomes appealing, and the citizen gives way to the tyrant. Returning to human dignity becomes nearly impossible. Yet Dostoevsky also found evidence of humanity's nobler side. Initially, he looked down on his fellow prisoners, believing these uneducated, illiterate men had nothing to teach him. As an educated noble, he saw little greatness in them. Over time, his perspective shifted. Beneath their rough exteriors, he began to see unexpected greatness of character and moral integrity. He wrote, "Sometimes you know someone for years and despise them, thinking they're a beast, not a man. Then suddenly, sometimes you know someone for years and despise them, thinking they're a beast, not a man. Then suddenly, in an unexpected moment, their soul opens in an involuntary impulse, revealing a wealth of feelings, a clarity of understanding about themselves and others that you never imagined. For a moment, you can hardly believe what you saw and heard. Those prison years also taught Dostoevsky about the human need for meaning and purpose. He noticed that almost all prisoners sought some activity, however simple, to escape the monotony of forced labor. Though these activities were technically forbidden, guards often allowed them, recognizing that without these small purposes, a revolt might occur. This led Dostoevsky to reflect on the essential role of purpose for psychological health. If you wish to crush and completely annihilate a man, applying the most terrible and inhumane punishment, it would be enough to give him a totally useless task, a purposeless job, like pouring water from one bucket to another or moving sand from one place to another and then back again. The prisoner would prefer to die rather than endure such humiliation, shame, and torment. Such punishment, without any reasonable goal, would become pure vengeance and torture. Decades later, Dostoevsky's idea about the destructive impact of purposeless work was cruelly put into practice in Nazi concentration camps. After a factory and a camp was destroyed by bombings, prisoners were forced to perform absurd, meaningless tasks. Eugene Heimler, a survivor, described the experience. The camp commander ordered hundreds of us to move sand from one side of the destroyed factory to the other. When we finished, we were forced to move it back. At first, we thought the guards had made a mistake, but then it became clear they hadn't. Day after day, week after week, we kept carrying sand back and forth. Gradually, people's minds began to break. Even those who had found some purpose in earlier work, even if it was for the Germans, couldn't bear the purposeless task. Some went mad and tried to escape, only to be shot. Others ran into the electric fences, ending their lives in desperation. Dostoevsky's prison experience also taught him that, besides purpose, hope is essential for psychological health and survival in adversity. The absence of both purpose and hope can destroy the human spirit and ultimately lead to the loss of sanity. He observed that prisoners who lost hope in a better future struggled greatly to withstand the mental and physical challenges of prison. When the ability to hope for tomorrow was completely destroyed, madness or death became inevitable. A striking example was a fellow prisoner who, in absolute despair, attacked a prison officer. For him, martyrdom seemed preferable to an existence without hope. Dostoevsky wrote, "A prisoner who read the Bible fervently lost all hope and attacked the major with a brick. He was likely one of the souls consumed by despair. When the last spark of hope vanishes, it's impossible to keep living." For him, voluntary martyrdom became a way to escape. He also reflected on the need for clear goals and purpose in life. Without something to strive for, a human often becomes a monster of anguish. For Dostoevsky, losing both purpose and hope was synonymous with spiritual destruction. The prison years from 1849 to 1854 were more than a test of physical and psychological endurance. They were a journey of self-discovery for Dostoevsky. He suffered much of his life from nervous disorders and debilitating anxiety. His extreme shyness caused him to faint in social situations, like being introduced to a woman at a party. He was also a hypochondriac, terrified of being buried alive after falling into a deep sleep mistaken for death. This fear was so intense that he left notes at home asking that, if found dead, people wait a few days before burying him. Additionally, he faced crippling panic attacks. He described these episodes to a friend 2 years before being sent to Siberia. "During my literary troubles and disputes, I was a victim of an unbearable nervous disorder. I can't describe the terrible sensations I experienced, but I remember them vividly. It felt like death was overtaking me, but then I'd come back again." Curiously, after 4 years in prison, Dostoevsky told his brother that the ordeal had cured his neuroses. "If you still think I carry traces of that nervousness, that anxiety, that suspicion I suffered from all possible illnesses, as I did in Petersburg, change your mind. There's no trace of that in me now." The experiences in prison, including solitary confinement, the mock execution, and years of hard labor, profoundly transformed Dostoevsky. They not only shaped his psyche, but also gave him new perspectives on human resilience and the power of meaning and hope to sustain the spirit. Dostoevsky concluded that suffering has the power to shape a person, while comfort and ease often lead to weakness and mediocrity. Adversity, whether by choice or fate, offers the chance to overcome weaknesses and reach a higher level of personal fulfillment. Without the 5 years of extreme suffering he endured, Dostoevsky likely wouldn't have written the great works of fiction for which he's revered. He might have remained a man tormented by neuroses, unable to reach his genius's full potential. In Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky explored the link between pain and greatness. For a high intelligence and a deep heart, suffering is always inevitable. The truly great, I believe, must bear that experience. The personal understanding that emerged from this not only defined Dostoevsky as one of history's greatest novelists, but also as an unparalleled chronicler of the complexity and depth of the human condition. His story isn't just that of a brilliant writer. It's of a man who descended into the hells of human existence and extracted truths that still resonate today. He faced pain, loneliness, humiliation, and despair, and transformed them into art, philosophy, and compassion. His novels don't offer easy answers, but force us to face our own shadows and ask what it means to be truly free, what it means to be truly human. As he wrote, suffering is the sole origin of consciousness. Perhaps that's why reading Dostoevsky today isn't just reading, it's confronting oneself. Thank you for watching.